What's up, everybody? It's Luke James, not the singer. If you're looking to get your music reviewed, you can hit up this email that's right here. But today I'm going to hit you up with my thoughts and opinions on this album from Big Sean called Detroit 2. Now obviously Big Sean is a rapper who's coming out of Detroit, and just as obviously, this is a follow-up to his 2012 mixtape called Detroit, which was highly acclaimed. A lot of people put that as some of Big Sean's best work, and myself, I would agree that it is some of his better work, along with Dark Sky Paradise. Within the past couple years though, things have been a bit more shaky. He dropped I Decided and Double or Nothing. Both of these albums received mixed reviews, and I wasn't a big fan of either, so I'm not a huge Big Sean fan, just to be upfront from the start, but I do give him credit because I have heard him snap, and there are some songs by him that I like. But then once I saw this track list come out, you got 21 tracks and a whole gang of features, I immediately kept my expectations kind of low, because usually when you come through with that formula, you're going to get a lot of filler and genericism, which is the case here. But I'd like to start with the positives, because I did wind up liking some of these songs. On a first listen, I had trouble making it through because it was so long and draggy, it just wasn't connecting with me, but then as I ran it back a couple of times, there were a couple of tracks that I liked, including Why Would I Stop and Zen the Fuck Out, or ZTFO. Both of these tracks are just nasty ass bangers, there's nothing too different with them, but I do like the way that Sean switches his flows up on some of these tracks, and the bass is thicker than British Olivia. If you don't know who that is, you're welcome, because you're going to look that up and be pleased. I also thought the song Feed had a really dope haunting backdrop, so that beat was really cool to me, and it has some memorable lines as well, like when Sean spits, "I dodged a cell but still locked on the cell. I never thought I'd see the day my mom wouldn't agree with Oprah and Gail." Obviously he's speaking on how he's managed to avoid incarceration over the years despite things that he's gone through, and he's bringing up that Gail King controversy when she was flapping her lips about Kobe not long after he died. So there are some moments of introspection you're going to get throughout here, and you're also going to get some interesting production moments. I thought the Baddest was just an all-out banger. This is a horn beat that samples the Godzilla march, as also heard on Pharoah Monch's song Simon Says, and with Dawn Life, you're getting a sample from Michael Jackson's classic song Human Nature. You're also getting a pretty solid Wayne verse here as he spits, "I stand beside a baby, see who you decide to play with." I just thought that was kind of a hard line, and there are some other decent lines on there too, so that was one of the better Wayne features that I've heard in a while. But to get back to the introspection that I briefly touched on, you're going to get a lot of that on the song Lucky Me. This track is very insightful and introspective. You're getting this gentle piano beat that eventually evolves into a banger, and Big Sean is opening up about a lot of issues here, including how he had a heart disease at 19 and he chose to treat it in different ways instead of just relying on Western medicine. And he also raps a little bit about having his breakups play out in the media, just how frustrating that can be. He's really venting on this track about a wide variety of issues, so I did appreciate that, but the off-kilter flow on this song and throughout the album, as is usually the case with Big Sean, can be a little bit frustrating and irritating at times. I do like the way that he switches his cadence and flow up on a lot of these tracks because it does sound cool, but there are instances where it feels like he's a little bit offbeat, trying to find a different pocket. It just doesn't always go over well, but sometimes it does. This song I thought it got a little bit wild at times, but I still appreciated the content. Then with the song Harder Than My Demons, he speaks even more about his struggles and how his faith has kept him grounded, but I didn't care for this track much at all, man. You're getting a really cheesy beat here, a weak ass hook. I would put this as one of my least favorites, but Deep Reverence with Nipsey Hussle, I would put that as one of my favorites. You're really getting some great chemistry between both of them here. Again, they're rapping about their struggles as well as their status, and I thought Sean had some memorable bars on here, like when he spits, "After what happened to Nipsey, I reached out to Kendrick. It wasn't even no real issues there to begin with. Lack of communication and wrong information from people fueled by their ego. It's like mixing flames with diesel." Obviously, when I read it out, it doesn't sound that great, but I thought it was kind of cool how he addressed that situation in regards to that control verse. When Kendrick was calling everyone out, a bunch of people were going back and forth, but really there wasn't any major beef there. People just start talking in the media and make shit go over the top. So I did appreciate that from him, and he even speaks on losing a child through miscarriage as well as some of his mental health battles. So if you're going to say that this has some introspection and growth behind it, I definitely am with you there. But as expected with the long album, there are way too many skips, man. It's really disappointing because there were a handful of tracks here that I liked, and if you cut off like the 4 or 5 worst tracks, I think this might have been Big Sean's best work, but as it is, there is not a good ratio here. So to quickly run down some of the tracks I didn't care for, you got Body Language. This is a plotting sex track that is about as interesting as cold molasses. The 2088 joint, Time In, has some of the worst singing attempts I've ever heard from Big Sean. Really does not go over well. And the Drakey track, Everything That's Missing, same thing. You're going to get a pretty bad vocal performance from Sean here. And it kind of bothers me because you got Dwele featured. I think Dwele is highly underrated. He's one of my favorite R&B artists, low-key. But he has him featured just to do backups. Like, what is the fucking audacity of that? You got Dwele on there, get him to sing the verse, and you do the backups. That would have made this one of my favorite songs, probably, because Dwele has a great verse. But as it is, his feature is almost non-existent. So that was kind of disappointing to me as someone who's a fan of Dwele. You know, you don't see Dwele pop up on a track list often, and here he is here, just barely existing. Now, to be honest with you, how you feel about some of these tracks is obviously going to have to do with how you feel about certain artists. So full disclosure, I am not a huge fan of Post Malone. If you've been watching my channel, you know that. And Travis Scott can be hit or miss for me. It just depends on the album, depends on the feature. But on this album right here, you get the song Wolves with Post Malone. This did absolutely nothing for me, kind of a generic banger. And Lithuania with Travis Scott, this just sounds like a cookie cutter Travis Scott track, but not a great one. It sounds like something that got cut by Travis Scott, and then he just gave it to Big Sean to do whatever he wanted to do with it. Very underwhelming track in my opinion. And even the song Respect It with Young Thug plays it pretty safe and doesn't leave much of an impression. I wouldn't put it as a least favorite, but it did feel kind of fillerish and generic. So these are a handful of tracks I didn't care for. Much better though is Guard Your Heart. You get Anderson .Paak on here, who brings a much needed jolt of energy and charisma. You're getting some soulful production here as well. And Sean has some more great lines as he spits. Conflicted like being signed to Ye and managed by Jay. Conflicted like being cool with Pusha and Drake. Just talking about how he's in the middle of all these things, these different beefs or disputes, and yet he's trying to be cool with everybody. So I did appreciate some of the lines from Sean on here. You're getting a great verse from Wale as well, who speaks on white silence in regards to racial issues, and he also calls out Drew Brees for the dumb shit that he said about the flag. So there are some moments here, but one moment, another disappointing moment. I feel like I've said disappointing a bunch of times in this review, but another disappointing moment has got to be that Friday Night Cipher. This one has a slew of Detroit artists rapping over switching instrumentals. At one point, you're even going to hear the same sample flip from Jadakiss and Styles P's song We Gon' Make It. But I don't know, man. I didn't like a lot of these verses here. Boldy James was pretty cool on this, and Royce the 5'9". Other than that, I wasn't blown away by these verses at all, man. I thought that Sada Baby verse was just all over the damn place. Eminem does that usual thing where he hops on the end of the track to drop this long-ass verse that's all over the place as well, just cramming syllables. You know how it goes, but I didn't really care for this shit at all. I thought it was going to be much better than what I got. So I would put that as one of my least favorites. I might be in a minority on that. Maybe that's a hot take, but I didn't really care for that one, so it is what it is. And overall, I'm going to go with a 5.5 out of 10 here, which is much better than I thought it was going to be after that first listen, because I had a struggle trying to make it through this damn thing, but eventually I did. I ran it back a couple of times, and that's why I don't review albums or mixtapes after one listen, because sometimes you got to listen to it a couple times to catch the vibe on a track. Maybe at the time you listen to it that first time, you might be tired after a long day of work or whatever the case is. But yeah, this is a pretty average album when you consider that I only like a handful of tracks. Then there are some tracks that are decent, like they're not all out trash, maybe I could deal with them, but then you get like a third of the album that I do not like at all. So there's way too many skips here for me to give this a positive review, but the tracks that I do like, I really like, man. Not that this is an overly negative review. I mean, a 5.5 would be a pass, but I ain't saying this is a great album to me. You cut a couple of those tracks, as I said earlier, and this probably would have been his best work. But that's what I got to say on this one. You do get 3 interludes, by the way, from Dave Chappelle, Erykah Badu, and Stevie Wonder. They're just telling stories about Detroit and their connection with it, so that's kind of interesting, but nothing too fancy. But yeah, that's all I got to say about this one, man. You guys hit me up down below with your thoughts and opinions, because I always want to know how you feel. And make sure you do that good YouTube and social media stuff where you show me love and you show me lots of it. Thank you for watching, everybody. I will see you next time.